I rise to speak to my amendments, number 71, 72 in this group, with a slightly different angle on this interesting topic of payment, which has been raised by my noble friend, the Earl of Effingham. Normally, I like to give the government a good roasting and criticise them and explain why it is I am so much ahead of them in my ideas than they are. On this occasion, since I've tabled these amendments and made further inquiries, I'm glad to say this will be an easy ride for the government, because they are actually doing quite a lot on this already, and things are going generally in the right direction. My first amendment relates particularly to the payment by concessionary fare holders, and the second relates to contactless payment. And the two may seem to be roughly the same, but they're actually very distinct, because contactless payment using a bank card, debit card, or a credit card cannot be used for those who have concessionary rights to travel on the buses, because obviously that right has to be evidenced, if you're going to use a card, by some identifier. And for those, to take an example, those who have the National Bus Pass will have a card, a photo card, of a distinctive style with an English rose on it. I remember it was an important feature when it was designed. So it has a card of a distinctive style with your face on it, and you need that in order to be able to demonstrate your right, both to the bus driver, who probably takes no notice of what's on the card, but certainly to a revenue protection officer, were they to board the bus and check. And this can't be done with a bank card. So one does need two types of technology involved here, and I want to deal with them separately. In London, the system that was developed for concessionary fare holders was originally the system used for all contactless payment, and it was the Oyster card technology. And it is still used for concessionary card holders. And this includes not just the elderly, the National Bus Pass people, but also those with freedom passes and young people who have free travel as well. That technology is used. But when the National Bus Pass was introduced by Gordon Brown's government, as I recall, that technology was not used, and the DfT preferred its own technology that goes under the name of ITSO, which TfL regarded as rather clunky. But the fact is that TfL then had to fit all of its buses, bus card readers, with equipment that could read two separate technologies in order to be able to read what's going on. This is a very foolish way of going about things. And I'd hope that the government would have, and that's the purpose of that amendment, is to suggest that as this develops, there should be a single system used that is applicable to concessionary card holders. The second amendment, 72, relates to contactless payment. Now, contactless payment is widely used in London and was promoted by TfL in collaboration with the banks. In fact, it's quite likely that the banks would never have taken the risk of introducing contactless payment into the country if it hadn't been for TfL turning up and saying, well, we have 4 million transactions a day, and if we were to get together, maybe we could make contactless work. It de-risks it to some extent for the banks, and it gives us something which is going to be even cheaper than the Oyster card system. Bear in mind that the driver of this from the bus operators, I just mentioned cheaper, the driver of this from the bus operators' perspective is cost of collection. And the one point I'd make, and I would never disagree with what my noble friend, the Earl of Effingham, says, and inclusion is very, very important. But one has to remember that cash is expensive to collect. And electronic payments much less. And of course you have to pay the banks, but TfL was quite lucky because it had a proposition for the banks, which I think meant it could negotiate a very good deal with the banks in terms of what it paid per transaction. certainly very much less than the cost of cash collection or even Oyster card operation. So if you're an ordinary passenger on TfL services nowadays, not a concessionary fare holder, you must notice that the advertising is all encouraging you to use contactless, not to get an Oyster card at all, but to use contactless. And that's the direction in which everything, I think, is going. But outside London, contactless payment is still rare. And the reasons for this are partly that the different bus companies all have different back offices. And the system needs to work in such a way that it will work with all the different back offices. And I'm delighted to be able to say, I'm preempting perhaps what the government, the noble Lord, the Ministry is going to say, that I've had some very interesting and valuable conversations with Midlands Connect, which is the non-statutory transport body for the Midlands, West Midlands and East Midlands, which on behalf of the government is carrying out work to try and develop a system that would work with all of the different back offices of the various different bus companies, so that it is possible that over time we could have contactless payment on the buses throughout the rest of the country. That would be very much welcomed. It would be useful if the Minister could say in his reply what the timetable for that is, how much resource the government is putting into it, what level of priority they regard it as having, and whether how they are going to work now with all the multiple LTAs up and down the country that will be running the buses, to make sure that it is actually adopted and adopted in a coherent way.